Few games in recent memory have been as discussed as the final entry in the legendary franchise of Metal Gear, a series spanning 30 years of innovation, creative writing, and directing. This latter one being unanimously attributed to the franchise's main influencer, Hideo Kojima, a man known to be fanatical over the techniques and history of film. Because of this, Kojima's games tend to present themselves in a very similar way to films, most notably classic action flicks from the 80s and 90s, following not only in aesthetics, character writing, and dynamics, but also in pacing and directorial techniques, some of which are worth praising. In the 2004 teaser/introduction game of his final game, Ground Zeroes, Kojima explores these techniques in a very interesting and elegant way, while also presenting and building characters on the political climates which have been building the series for years. Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes has been one of the most interesting and refreshing game experiences I've had in a long time. An intricately constructed stealth experience driven by the interconnectivity of its level design and meticulously crafted movement and stealth systems that allow for creativity and improvisation to be ridiculously rewarding. Something that the series has been constantly improving in its major titles and deserves acknowledgement for. The movement and stealth systems feel fantastic to play around in, and are responsible for imitating the action movie excitement that the series has always attempted to imitate, even if it's significantly more forgiving than previous games, which many will argue takes away some of the intended tensions that a stealth game needs to be interesting. It manages to add a level of smoothness that incentivates and encourages brave decisions, which brings a charm and satisfaction of its own. It's a good thing that the system is brought mostly untouched into the continuation of this game, the Phantom Pain, which is great since the gameplay seems to be the most appreciated and universally enjoyed aspect of both games. All this being said, Metal Gear isn't just known for housing fun and interesting mechanics, it's also widely recognized for its storytelling and directing, which have become exotically famous worldwide. The introduction to Ground Zeroes is cinematographically impressive, interesting and eye-catching all around. A spectacle of lights, detail, and grotesque imagery are a thrill to view every single time I start the main mission up. As the strangely upbeat rhythm of the intro song, Here's to You, juxtaposes with the heavy rain and Skullface's intimidating yet mysterious presence. The player is given a brief introduction to the map layout and terrain, which will help them later on when exploring Camp Omega on their own, which is very clever use of cutscene and gameplay teaching, which Kojima has become a specialist at. All this while using extremely memorable shots and no cuts at all. It's just brilliant. Because of this concise and meticulous directing, it feels almost jarring how the Phantom Pain develops on its own. Phantom Pain continues 9 years after the events of Ground Zeroes, and is immediately apparent that it is a game dedicated to enforce its themes and messages through the experience of the player and their expectations. This is at its most notable and prominent on the opening prologue of the game, one which players will revisit at the end of the game and that has been crafted to inflict feelings and sensations I could only describe as dreamlike at times, for better or worse. The more I sit on this prologue and the direction choices Kojima decided on, the more I think they were done in a more convoluted and arguably worse way on purpose. This wouldn't be anything new for Kojima, since he appreciates absolutely destroying player expectations. But for some reason, the subtle ways this prologue plays out, mixed with the controversy around the fact that this game is very much incomplete, make the experience of making sense of Kojima's decisions sort of surreal. I'd agree that narratively, how this informs the relationship between Quiet and Venom, passes side quests, and Huey's downfall, are narratively the most interesting parts of the Phantom Pain. Everything else feels like white noise, apart from perhaps some tapes. Phantom Pain feels lacking in memorable story events. Even the big moment, like the Metal Gear being stolen, just feels sort of bland, even after watching the final Lord of the Flies chapter. This being said, what Phantom Pain lacks in memorable story beats, it has in memorable level design. Giant fortresses fill the deserts of Afghanistan, while mansions, forests, and chemical plants are scattered through Africa to create a very varied and memorable environment. It seems the team decided on the structure of Afghan as the main hub for interesting bases with creative architecture for the players to infiltrate, while Africa served for a more varied style of environments like docks, rivers, tunnels, and the previously mentioned forest and mansion, for more atmospheric and unusual areas for the players to explore and sneak through. Also usually more horizontally designed than Afghan's multi-layered vertical levels. It's fair to say that these structural designs and the ridiculously varied and creative ways these missions can be approached in, just like in Ground Zeroes, make the missions of the Phantom Pain an absolute joy to play through. Mixed in with the way story beats are peppered in slowly but frequently enough to keep you engaged. And it's hard to see why this game is so contested and divisive. Which brings us to the biggest and most latent problem the Phantom Pain has is the expectations set by the idea of separating the game in chapters, because it sets itself up for failure and disappointment like I've never seen before. I wager to say that most people who play through the Phantom Pain by its halfway mark would have considered it a very good game, perhaps lacking in some of the hallmarks of previous Metal Gear games, but overall very fun. I also bet most people reached the halfway mark right after what would be one of the most interesting and memorable couple of missions in the game, and got extremely excited for the Chapter 2 trailer. After all, if there's something Kojima is better at doing than games, it's the trailers for his games. This is bad, very bad in fact, because Chapter 2 is a bunch of repeated missions and the occasional very sparse original mission with some cutscenes. Which is a shame because Chapter 2 has some of the better character developing moments and story events of the whole game. But because they're drowned in an ocean of repeated missions and bad pacing, they tend to leave a bitter taste in people's mouths. Not to mention the amount of unfinished content. Now, I consider Kojima a good director. Great in fact. But this is all by all means bad directing. All around, and it comes from Kojima's ambition to create the chapter gimmick in the game. Something that didn't bode well with players even with the pre-mission credits on every mission, which I don't really consider a bad directorial choice. In fact, that and the chapters are very creative and inspired decisions for a game built like Phantom Pain. And I really feel that if they were done properly, it would have benefited the experience even more, but sadly it did not. It's no secret why this happened. Kojima's well-documented and very public controversy with Konami is something that has, till this day, 2 years later, destroyed Konami's public image. Kojima was too ambitious, and even at the point where any reasonable and responsible director would have decided to cut down on directorial ideas and flair to create a more cohesive and composed experience, he decided to continue and just fill the cracks with, well, just poopy. This is by all means bad directing, bad producing, and just overall bad leadership from Kojima's part. And to then let it explode into this big drama, not to mention his irresponsible way of dealing with transparency about the game before it came out, as it was the case with David Hayter and Kojima's infamous quote regarding regretting your words and deeds because of Quiet's design, which turned out to be bull hockey. And you can see that Kojima was just not in his best form while both finishing the game and dealing with the world's reaction to the hype for the game. Be it by career fatigue from the Metal Gear series, be it by Konami cutting funds, be it by whatever it may be, the outcome of the game is by all means bad directing and producing from Kojima's part. Even after all this though, I still consider Kojima a good director, because I have a strong feeling he knew all this. I'm not saying he did this all on purpose, or that he planned all this to go down as some sort of form of artistic expression, or that Death Stranding is a ploy by both Konami and Kojima to reveal the biggest bamboozle of all with Chapter 3. What I'm saying is, he realized all of the problems he had with the production of the game by the end. He saw the themes and messages he wanted to express to his audience, and he decided to just roll with it. After all, what better way to end the game about feeling like something is missing than to literally have a good chunk of the game actually be missing? The ending of MGS5 is really sad, not narratively, but as a product, especially for big fans of the series. But most of the experience is filled with a very fun, interesting, and sometimes genius game, led by a man that has crafted a 30-year-old franchise. A series that was intended to end proper over a decade ago, with every sequential attempt to end the series being more and more bombastic. Yet I would compare the end MGS5 has presented us with the ending MGS2 attempted to make back in 2001. An ending more controversial, abstract, open-ended than most media would ever dare. Sending more a message than a narrative conclusion, and yet doing that too, in a creative way, even if stumbling very hard on the way. Overall, I know it's a game that I consider memorable, and in many ways, it's just a mess of a masterpiece. Also, how come it's the 80s, right? But the anime posters look like modern anime? Like this is some K-On looking stuff right here.